So for our final speaker, we have Mr. Andy Coote, and he's the Chief Executive Officer for ConsultingWhere. And I think many of you in the audience today know Andy. He's a stalwart in the community, a land surveyor by education who embraced information technology, and has really built a career on combining those interests in evolving the GIS space. Also, fondly from our perspective, he's a former member of the Esri family. But I think it's important to highlight, when he was with Ordnance Survey Great Britain, he was one of the thought leaders in the creation of the master map. And we've had OSGB people speak at NGEFs in the past in what they're doing in driving the UK economy with that. So recently, Andy has been supporting the UN GGIM. So that's the United Nations Global Geospatial Information Management branch that we've been talking about today. He's been supporting the committee of experts really since 2012, and he contributed to the development of the integrated geospatial information framework. I think Lorraine probably highlighted it the best on how they're using and implementing that within Ordnance Survey Ireland, but everyone has kind of fundamentally addressed IGIF. He's also a member of the core reference group. And we've asked him to join us today to really talk about his experience on supporting the Secretariat on developing the IGIF country action plans, because this is really getting to the nuts and bolts of how countries can be successful on implementing the IGIF, the struggles that they've had and their experiences and lessons learned. So we are fortunate to have Andy with us this morning to discuss his experiences and insight into the implementation. So I'm going to turn over control to Andy. And Andy, you are showing us. Do you want to switch your displays for us?
Yeah, I will do that now.
Perfect.
Okay, so good morning, good evening to all of you. I'm really pleased to be able to make this keynote address. Such an august gathering of leaders in our field happens relatively rarely, so I don't want to waste this opportunity with repeating too much of the very, very good stuff that's been said today already. I think that good governance, bringing together technology advances, and above all, the people aspect, in my experience, is the main ingredient of all successful projects. We've seen that, I think, when you look at the fantastic work that Ordnance Survey Ireland have done in bringing together a team that's met and contributed to the greatest challenge of our time. But clearly, we've still got many challenges. Particularly, my interest is in developing countries, and we can see from the discussions today that there are still many hurdles that we have to cross. However, I sense that we're very well placed to become more influential in the future development of the countries, cities, and organisations in which we live and work. And we must make sure that we grasp our opportunities. And I think we're going to do that if we share experience through events like today. I'm just going to talk briefly about a little bit of context, because I think that it's important that we put together some fairly standard sets of slides that talk to the challenges and the value that we bring, and we can do that by working together. We don't need to do those 190 times for each country in the world. I'm then going to talk a little bit about, Jack brought this up, about this word infrastructure and how important that is. Some of my experiences, as Randall has said, about the IGIF, and then maybe some key takeaways that we can go back to our decision makers in our countries and use straight away, because that's the real value that an event like today adds. It inspires us, it gives us information to perhaps make that business case that we failed to do in the past. So I think one of the key things to me is that we're now in what's called the fourth industrial revolution. which is dubbed as the information age. And the information age is characterized by digital transformation from traditional industry models to a global economy where data and communications are becoming the driving force of social evolution. The information age is also driving change in how our organizations and nations develop policy and make decisions. This is a picture of Peter Drucker. He's one of the most influential business thinkers of our age. And his marquee phrase was, "You can't manage what you don't measure." And geospatial is essentially about measuring our world more comprehensively, more accurately, and more frequently than we've ever done before. And it therefore follows that we can't manage our world without increasingly sophisticated GIS tools. I was very pleased to hear Jack emphasizing geospatial infrastructure in setting Esri's direction of travel and their organization of thinking. So I'd like to work just to dwell on this word infrastructure for a moment or two. We can all recognize physical infrastructure in the world around us. Without an efficient national transport infrastructure, we cannot deliver goods or get to work. Without a national energy infrastructure, we cannot deliver electricity to charge our smartphones or to call our offices. Although it may not be so physically evident, I would also suggest that a national information infrastructure is just as essential to growing our societies. For the past 20 years or so, many countries have put considerable effort into developing what we usually refer to as national spatial data infrastructures, or NSDI. I have to say, with varying levels of success. What I think is important now is that we position NSDI as an integral part of national information infrastructure, rather than as something separate. And that seems to be an essential evolution in our thinking as we go forward. I also think it's important that we recognize that not all geospatial data sets are necessarily part of the information infrastructure. UNGGIM, in fact, defines a relatively small number of geospatial data themes as fundamental. These themes are selected to underpin a wide range of applications across many industries, making them easier to develop. Based on these criteria, different countries have also added extra fundamental themes to reflect their national needs. And in my experience, energy and telecoms networks are sometimes included as fundamental themes, cultural heritage, but also, I think very importantly, marine themes, because if we think about it, geospatial infrastructure runs from the bottom of the deepest trench in the sea to the top of the highest mountain. And it's increasingly possible that we don't have a separation of the way we look at these things from a marine perspective and a terrestrial perspective. To talk about the IGIF and what I think is important to it in the work that I've been involved with is, first of all, to start looking at this jigsaw puzzle. The jigsaw puzzle has three essential headings. It has governance, technology, and people. And we need to bring all of those together, I believe, in order to make optimum use of geospatial information in our countries. Under the governance headings, I think we've gone beyond what traditionally we thought about as an SDI. We now are putting more emphasis around governance and institutions, legal and policy, and very, very importantly, finance, because it seems to me that often the best initiatives are stopped because the funding is not there, and we need to pay attention to how we overcome that obstacle. Under technology, data and standards have long been fundamental pillars of SDI development, but IGIF adds innovation at the center of the jigsaw puzzle, recognizing it's important to making, first of all, SDI affordable, but also making it sustainable. And then under the people stream, we start to look at the importance under partnership of shared future vision and close collaboration. These are the effective mechanisms by which we are going to move forward. And we've seen some great examples of those partnerships in the presentations today. Capacity in education is given new prominence with detailed guidance around what I think is a fundamental, important aspect of creating centers of excellence. Most countries do not have enough people who understand the significance of what we're doing. And we need to reach out and make sure that it's not just the geospatial community that understands this, but it's understood much more widely within a wider community. And finally, I would point to communications and engagement. This is a very welcome addition and provides guidance on changing the narrative, particularly when we're engaging with decision makers. IGIF has got a lot of good examples included within it, and I would refer you to the Annex 2 part of the guidance within it. However, the World Bank has further enhanced the body of good practice by developing an IGIF implementation methodology, as illustrated in this slide. Perhaps the most significant components of this methodology are, first of all, the alignment to policy drivers step, designed to ensure that the selection of geospatial use cases that we push forward optimally support implementation of the most important government policies. And then, alluding back to what Michael was talking about, the socioeconomic benefits assessment, a set of tools and resources to assist in creating the business case for investment in SDI projects. And the fundamental outcome of all of this work is an action plan or a roadmap, accompanied by a costed investment plan, which we can put in front of our most senior decision makers in order for them to authorize the resources and the financial support to optimally support our societies. To move down a level to some of the practical tips on using IGIF, I've worked on a couple of projects right through from baselining the current position to creating the full implementation plan. And those have been in very different areas. One was in Guyana in the top of South America, and the other was in Mongolia. And both of those experiences have convinced me of its practical value. However, we can't look at the IGIF as a cookbook. You can't simply follow through the steps that are talked about and end up with a perfect solution for your country. Each country starts from a different point of maturity. It starts with different priorities and different cultures. And we need to make sure that those are fundamental to our thinking about what we pick up from IGIF. We don't need to pick up everything that's in there. We don't need to put a tick against everything before we can say that our solutions are based on IGIF. I think that one of the other observations would be that it can be applied to a wide range of situations. Originally, the IGIF was focused around developing countries, but I think as Lorraine has explained, it can be applied to developed countries as well. And it can be applied at different levels of granularity. It can be looked at national levels. It can also be looked at regional levels and for city administrations as well. The private sector also, I think, has something to be gained from looking at the guidance. The other thing that I'd like to say on this slide is to do with quick wins. Often building confidence in your decision makers that what you've said you can do, you actually can deliver, can be helped sometimes by looking at pilots either in particular sectors or in particular cities. And I've seen some very, very good examples in particular Asian countries where they've looked at cities and implementing SDI successfully within that kind of context. And the last thing I'd like to point out is that the IGIF guides should be regarded as living documents. There are, to the people who've been involved in it, we know that there are inconsistencies. Maybe there are things that have been missed out. But I think that as a basis for moving forward, they're excellent. But we need to make sure that over the next few years, the experience of implementing IGIF more widely starts to get baked into those documents. So it's important that they are revised on a regular basis. Going back to my theme about people, I think the whole geospatial ecosystem is the other thing that I would observe and ask you to think about with IGIF. I think that the UNGGIM has done some very good and welcomed work around integration with the marine community and also with geostatistics. But I think a much wider interdisciplinary approach is really needed. We need a dialogue that goes beyond the utilities and the land managers. We need to be talking to the financial services community. We need to be talking to video developers and a number of other disciplines who can bring a richness to what we can provide to them by using SDI. The other aspect of this is engaging economists. Economists can help us to craft the business case for investment in a way that falls well with decision makers. Often decision makers are surrounded by economists, and speaking their language is one of the important things that we need to do. I think that in a lot of countries, data sharing is often hampered by a culture that knowledge is power. And we need to try and convince people that actually wider access rather than restricted access is a way of being able to increase their influence. And this is a really very human and individual kind of problem, and it's not easy. I think the other thing is we need to be more accepting of non-conventional data sources. Crowdsourcing can help us to enhance quickly, particularly the human geography that we need in order to make maximum impact with spatial data infrastructures. And finally, I think we need to improve location literacy. I've talked about how we need to speak the language of decision makers, but we also need to pick use cases which are simple to understand for citizens, because often they can help us to take bottom up the messages through to decision makers. And also we ourselves need to learn to speak in a much more simple and understandable way. We too often fall back into our jargon, and there are so many examples of this, and perhaps one of the most important ones is we don't even have standard language we use ourselves. Are we dealing with spatial data? Are we dealing with geospatial? Are we dealing with location? Are we using the word place? We have a branding problem about the way that we present ourselves, and this is something that I think is becoming a more and more important challenge. If we look at the way in which we communicate and make our community wider, I think this Africa GeoPortal is an excellent example. It not only provides access to a wealth of data sources, but also to learning opportunities, knowledge exchange, and the ability to download free tools. And my hat's off to the Esri team that actually put this together. Just to back up some of Michael's statements around the field that increasingly we call geoeconomics or geovalue, I would draw attention to this study, which was carried out by economic consultants Alpha Beta in 2017. And what it stresses is not just the benefits of geospatial to government or to business, but consumer benefits and societal benefits. So I would, the reference is in there. I certainly would advocate reading it. It's not long, but it's very valuable, and I refer to it often. The other one is around environmental benefits. Environmental benefits are often quite qualitative. They're difficult to put into terms of dollars or other currencies. And this is an absolutely great resource, and it's quite easy to remember because it's relatively close in terms of the initials to Esri. But this is the environmental valuation reference inventory. There are over 2,700 different cases of valuing the impact of the environment and putting monetary values against it. So please, once again, go and have a look at this. It's a tremendous resource. So just to finish off, I wanted to just go through some of the key takeaways from today and maybe build those up into a single slide that perhaps you can take back to your decision makers tomorrow. The first one is better geospatial infrastructure can locate those in the world being left furthest behind. And I love the visualizations that were presented by Rachel. The second thing is geospatial infrastructure can provide the evidence base for absolutely critical decision making. And the work by Lorraine and the team in OS Ireland, I think it should be inspiration to us all. Better geospatial infrastructure can save lives and reduce the costs of damage by improving disaster risk management. And the work that's been carried out in Myanmar by Dr. Mayat and her team, I think, shows what can be done with relatively limited resources in developing countries. Geospatial infrastructure can realize provable savings from collaboration. There are some great messages, I think, from the work that we saw that Simone has carried out with her colleagues in Jamaica. The other thing that really struck me on that one was that they had managed to get into the vision for the country for 2030 statements about geospatial data, and also the longevity, which had meant that the confidence and the trust between the different partners within government have been built up over multiple generations of individuals. And I think that's absolutely key. The collaboration doesn't happen instantly. You have to build trust. And by having people working together over an extended period, I think you can achieve tremendous amounts. Better geospatial infrastructure can identify gender inequalities and evaluate measures to address them. And I think the key thing to me was Paloma talking about the number of sustainable development goals that can actually not only be reported on using geospatial, but also we can influence decision makers to make better decisions by giving them information that they can visualize, and the analysis will help them to make better decisions. And finally, one of our big problems historically has been around having the evidence that investment in geospatial actually gives a return on investment. And Michael has pointed to a number of studies in the US, but also some international studies as well. And the process of what's called benefits transfer, where you can look at some of these studies that have been carried out in the developed world and apply them using the techniques of benefits transfer to developing countries, is something that I think is a very important learning point and something that I've spent a lot of time on recently. And so therefore, I think we can put those together in this slide. The first 6 of those are directly derived from what we've heard today. I think we might also add that there are other key things for decision makers: the ability to create new jobs, and finally, perhaps the most important of the lot, we can help to save the planet. So thank you very much for listening, and back to you, Randall, for Q&A.
All right, thank you, Andy. That was fantastic. And I definitely appreciate you wrapping back and connecting the link to all the other speakers and their messages. I'm going to try to turn my video on while we do a little bit of Q&A, see if my video wakes up. It's been dormant for a little while. How are we doing? Okay. So
Can you see me?
I can't see anything right now, but that's probably because I'm the presenter. I have you now. So thank you. I mean, great message. I see in the questions that Mr. Greg Scott from the UN GGIM Secretariat posted a link to the IGIF, so thank you for that. You've got such a valuable message, and I think that your personal experience, on the ground in Mongolia, in Guyana, maybe you could just highlight for us what you saw at that local level, and obviously that's a lower and moderate economic country. What do you see as their biggest challenges for implementing the IGIF?
Well, Guyana is interesting in that they actually have quite a lot of good data, but it's not shared. It's not shared effectively, and that is perhaps their number one challenge, is to share that data, to have confidence in each other that they're trying to achieve a common goal. So that would be the thing I would pick out from Guyana, and certainly I felt we made a lot of progress during the 6 months. And it doesn't have to be a huge period of time to go through creating an action plan from scratch. That would be the other observation there. In Mongolia, the challenges I think are trying to use geospatial to help spread the base of the economy. And we spend a lot of time there on looking at a variety of different use cases. The Mongolian economy is very much based around natural resources. And one of the things they want to try and do is to widen that economy. So a lot of what we were doing there was trying to say, okay, so in implementing those kind of policies, how can geospatial help? And what I found, Randall, with a lot of these is that the geospatial people, and it's because we maybe sometimes can't see the wood for the trees, that we found that was quite difficult to get to the point, first of all, engaging some of these parts of the government structure that, quite honestly, the National Mapping Organization had very little contact with, and then being able to explain in simple terms why we could bring value. So that's the observation from there. And perhaps briefly, the third one is Seychelles, where the big driver there is around disaster risk management and combating climate change. And again, that went back to data sharing, and the big achievement there by the team was to create a national data sharing policy.
So policy is a key point. So one of the slides, kind of midway through, you talked about alignment of national policies as a key factor to success. Maybe you can describe some examples where there was a mismatch, where there wasn't alignment, and then, does that create an immediate impedance to success?
I'd phrase it slightly differently. What we found was a lot of alignment, and one of the problems was honing it down from 10 or 12 different sectors to 2 or 3, where the value could be added quickly, and therefore that could start to build the confidence, and, if you like, create peer pressure for others to come in towards backing this kind of initiative. Sometimes it's seen that if you're the pioneers are the ones with the arrows in their back. They're the ones that perhaps get shot down for being innovative. So we needed to create an environment where it was comfortable for people to innovate and be pioneers. The other thing is that geospatial often has to be hooked onto something. Digital transformation is a great thing to hook onto, I think, at the moment. But of course, you know, we've now got health as waking up to the value of what we can do. And so what you're looking for in order to try and push these things forward is a source of funding. And often the World Bank, the United Nations, they have a series of initiatives that are already baked in to how they engage with the national government. And if you can link into those, whether it's land management or whether at the moment it's health, then you can much more easily get access to funding if you can help those initiatives to be successful. So I think that's one of the other things I would observe is you are looking to see where you can hitch your wagon to something that's already rolling.
Excellent. So one of the questions from the audience, you know, and maybe you have information on this, maybe you don't, you know, but is there data available about how much investment in GIS scales with GDP development level? Is that something?
I wish there was. I wish there was a, you know, that we'd actually done enough work across enough countries that you could start to do that. The only thing I would say is that studies such as the one in Guyana, that's now public, and it's been talked about in a number of different conferences. Particularly, I could point afterwards, Randall, to the Land and Poverty Conference that the World Bank runs, and we had a series of presentations on Guyana. The one thing that's quite difficult to share often is the socioeconomic benefits, because often you're looking at efficiencies within government. In order to construct those financial models, you're looking at the costs of individuals. You're looking at a number of confidential sources of information, and it's a shame, but it's just the reality that often that kind of information is not available for free. But I've been working with a group called the GeoValue Group, which is an international community of practice, and we have been building up a database of different socioeconomic studies, like the ones that Michael highlighted. But at last count, there are about 60 or 70 of those. And that's been the feedstock of scaling those to particular countries that we've been working in. You can't just do it on GDP. Often you have to bring in a series of different scalars in order to get a sensible position, because GDP hides a lot. I think it was Paloma, or it may have been Rachel at the beginning. There's huge amounts that are not covered by GDP. Anybody who's looking after their mother, looking after parents or whatever, they don't count in GDP. There are huge holes in terms of value in the planet that are not included in GDP. So you have to try and look at other measures in order to make your scaling acceptable to the economists.
All right, thank you. So maybe if you could just take a quick moment and just to describe, you know, what was involved in developing a country action plan. Really about, you know, kind of start not cradle to grave, because we don't have that much time, but just kind of give the audience an overview of what types of elements were involved in kind of going out and executing and building that strategy.
Okay, so the slide that I had, which was the World Bank implementation methodology, is quite a good starting point. First of all, you need a baseline. Where are you starting from? And often those baselines are put together by the data suppliers. Please don't do that. Please go and talk to the users to make sure that that first of all, it's to do with ownership at the beginning, but it's also to do with perhaps the skewed vision that we have as suppliers. Also, there's some very, very good tools in the IGIF Part 2 for question and answer kind of approaches to building up that baseline. The second one is the alignment to policy drivers. You need that straight away after understanding where you are, because you want to know where you're heading, and that's what the alignment helps you to do. It also, in the methodology that the World Bank have developed, it helps you to look at things like the spheres of influence of the various suppliers and also users. And that also helps you, because inevitably they will have some pre-formed views about what this SDI is. Perhaps if the initiative's been going for 20 years, they just want to throw it out because it's never worked. So there's quite a lot of education, working with different people to change their mindset and to see that you can start again and you're bringing something new. The economic, socioeconomic benefits is absolutely fundamental. Anybody I talk to in any country in the world, well, I haven't come across one that says we've got more than enough resources, we've got more than enough people, and we've got more or less as much money as we need. It just doesn't happen like that. And as we head into what could be a very deep and very long recovery from COVID, this is going to be even larger. So getting your heads around that economic piece is really important, and it needn't be complex. Most of the people listening to this have got good quantitative training, and a lot of the things that we're looking at, they're not complex mathematically. They are to do with politics, and they're to do with hard graft of bringing information together to back that up. And then those three components are then used to create the action plan, and importantly alongside it, the investment plan, because you're going to want to go in to speak to the senior decision makers with a series of strategic messages, as the ones I put up on the screen, but also the immediate thing they're going to say is, that's fine, show me the money. And so you've also got to have that constructed and socialized in advance of those kind of meetings with decision makers, so that there are other people in the room that back up what you're saying.
Okay, thank you. And I think one of the aspects that you pointed to was kind of the scale, applying it against the national level, the regional or provincial, and down to the city. You made mention of private entities, and I think it's actually quite interesting, because not that the UNGGIM and they need validation of IGIF, but we do have numerous cases where private entities, global corporations, are coming to us asking for assistance and insight into implementing IGIF across their global corporation. So I don't think there could be any more validation than that on what the UN has put together with World Bank. And I think that it is expansive, and it's not I think you referred to it, it's not a cookbook. You can take the pieces and parts that are appropriate for where you are in a maturity level on implementing your program. So, thank you for sharing that with us. I think we are about to wrap up. We're a little bit over. I was going to do a little bit of a summary, but Andy, you did a fantastic summary for us. So I'm just going to move ahead. And, it's important that we come together as a community. This year we're kind of celebrating what our country customers and representatives have experienced with implementing IGIF. I think a logical next step would be to talk about how it's supporting transparency in government and open data. Maybe that'll be a topic for a future NGEF event. But we are very glad that you were all able to join us and share with us and listening to the messages from our experts. I'm just going to actually scroll with it. Move forward. Just a few announcements. So we are posting all the material as well as the videos online for everyone to come back and pull down. We want to find a way to share this out as a community. So we're going to look to leverage an Esri hub community to build the NGEF so that you can come together, share your stories, build a network in our environment. One thing we wanted to highlight, and we've talked about this before, but this is the UCG, or the User Community of Geospatial Authorities. It's a group of, shall we say, forward-leaning authoritative data providers, so mapping and charting agencies, statistical agencies that are looking to how best leverage technology to meet their mission requirements and bring value to their economies. We have two existing working groups, one that has been looking at map generalization for quite a few years. We have another one that stood up to look at applying AI and ML into this community. So we're always looking for participants, and it's really a key point. It's a community of participants. So it's not just kind of joining an email list and kind of following along. We're looking for people to get actively involved, to share their ideas, to commit to participating on work groups of peers, of industry and government peers. So there's a link there that'll be available for you afterwards. Finally, I want to thank our speakers, for giving their time, sharing their outlooks and their missions with us. It's been a great morning. And we look forward to taking this community forward. Obviously, we're still working in a virtual environment. We really don't know what the beginning of next year will look like. Obviously, many of us participated in the 10th session of the UN GGIM Committee of Experts just a month ago and had that virtual experience. We wanted to kind of continue that theme and build on it with real-world implementation examples. And we will continue that dialogue both as a company and as a community. So once again, thank you to our speakers and thank you for your time. We know it's valuable to you. Please, if you have additional questions, continue to post them. We will provide feedback, whether it's from one of the particular speakers or in general. We'll make sure your answers get out there for you. So once again, thank you very much on behalf of Esri. I hope you have a great day and take a little bit of information back to your organizations.